Welcome back, y'all, and happy Tuesday. Today, we're going to be breaking down the SEC championship matchup between Texas and UGA. This is a rematch. I think it's going to be a very big one and probably a very good one. Now, we're breaking this stuff down based off of film that we watch. It's not like everybody else where, it's kind of like watch the games and stuff. We go very, very deep, okay, with how this matchup is going to end up playing out, and there will be a whole lot of information in this video. Please do make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. All right, so we'll be starting off with the stats. This is over the course of this whole season. All the numbers that you're seeing is on a per game basis. And this is Texas's offense versus UGA's defense. I can tell you right now about Texas's offense. It is more of a pro style offense. They're going to run the football about 37 times a game, and then they're going to pass it about 33 times a game. So they are a run first team. They love to run that outside zone, which is something that Georgia typically does kind of struggle with, more of those outside runs. And their passing game is going to be a lot of backfield flares. So that's just like throwing the football very short out to the flats. That can come from running backs. That can come from tight ends. That can come from wide receivers. That's the bulk of what they like to do. They don't force the football down the field that much. Outside of that, you'll see a lot of hitches. You'll see some outs, and then you'll see some digs. But I think that Texas does need to try to go down the field a little bit more versus UGA defense, which has shown that they are not great in coverage down the field. If they can get somebody isolated on a deep ball, Georgia's secondary is a liability down there. Now, I will also point out that Texas does struggle with blitzes, okay, because they do a whole lot of screens and things like that. People think that they are a team that will kill blitzes, but that pretty much blows up their entire offense because a lot of their stuff is 5 to 7 step drops, and they're not doing a very good job of picking up different blitz packages and schemes, whether that's from the inside or outside. I think that's how Georgia got the upper hand on them in the previous game. Georgia likes to run a 3-3-5 on defense, and they're not particularly great at any one thing. I think that they're just pretty solid at almost everything, but there's plenty of places that you can take advantage of Georgia's defense, and it's more about just being simple. There's no need to get overly complicated, which is something that Sark likes to do on offense. If he could just dumb things down, make it very simple, run the football right at Georgia, stick to the run, then I think that Texas will find success versus Georgia's defense. Now let's flip the page and talk about Georgia's offense versus Texas's defense. Of course, Georgia's offense is a pro-style offense, but they're pass first this season. They throw the football about 37 times, and they run it about 30 times a game. So that would explain why they're ranked 101 in rush offense. But it's not so much that they can't do it, they just don't really stick to it because they're averaging like 4.5 or 4.6 yards per carry rushing the football on the ground. And it does feel like they've tried to stick to the running game a little bit more over these past couple of games. That could spell trouble for anybody that they face coming up in the college football playoffs and even in this game versus Texas. Now, Georgia loves to run inside zone, but last time that they played Texas, they ran a little bit more outside zone either way. What I have noticed about Texas's defense is within that 3-3-5, the pass coverage, I mean, literally from top to bottom, first, second, third level, everybody is really good at pass defense. Their front four, okay, or their front, three, however you want to slice that up, they do a great job of rushing the passer. Everybody plays great coverage. Actually, they've only given up 4 passing touchdowns this season to 19 interceptions. But I'm going to tell you right here, right now, their rush defense is ranked number 23. I think that's just because teams are not running the football at them nearly enough. I am not impressed with their running defense. Their tackles consistently get moved, and I'm talking about moved a lot. Their linebackers are way too patient to come downhill. Same thing with their safeties. They are playing pass first on almost every single play. Now, if there's a situation where it's third and short, whether that's third and goal, third and one, fourth and one, whatever, in situations like that, when Texas unleashes their linebackers and they blitz, that right there is almost impossible to run against, but they have not stuck to that sort of a defensive mindset. So I think that where Georgia did have success running the football on Texas last game, we might see the exact same thing in this game. But going back to Georgia's offense, within their passing game, they love to run wide screens, and they'll have a whole lot of combinations off of that where it's a fake screen and they'll go deep. But then outside of that, like all the stuff that's wide into the flats, we're going to see a lot of stuff targeting the middle of the field. So we're talking about digs, we're talking about slants. That's where Georgia makes their bread and butter at. And it's still not a lot of vertical threats. They don't throw the football down the field as much as you might think. All right, so looking at those stats, you would think that Texas should be the much more dominant team because they're winning in all the categories that we like to look at, all of the major ones. But that's not how the previous game went. And like we just talked about before, the main thing, I think that caused that is because Texas on defense, man, their defensive tackles get moved so much. Their linebackers are so slow to get downhill that the inside zone that Georgia loves to run is killing them. And I've seen several other teams, even A&M, whenever they kind of stuck to that inside zone, they were moving Texas's front. I would expect that in this game, UGA will continue to do maybe even more of that, and that could definitely spell trouble for Texas on defense. Now, we could also talk about the simple fact that Texas does not do a good job picking up blitzes. Georgia loves to blitz. We're going to look at some more numbers right here in just a second, but Georgia loves to blitz, especially up the middle, but they will bring those cornerback blitzes, and Texas is not doing a good job of picking those things up. If Texas wants to have a chance to win this game, they're going to have to find a way to get their defense improved in the middle, okay, and to stop that run more, that inside zone more, and they also have to figure out how to pick up blitzes or have some sort of a counter to that. And I don't think that it's going to work always running these super complex screens and things like that. That could end up hurting Texas. But if Georgia kind of falls into the trap that they normally do, where they stick to the passing game more, they're going to have a whole lot of trouble versus Texas. That's why Carson Beck threw 3 interceptions and 0 touchdowns in the previous matchup. Also, I have a very interesting stat, because if you looked at that previous game, then you would have thought, man, Texas kind of got blown out. But let me show you all this. This is all of UGA scoring drives versus Texas and where they started off at. So the first one starts at Texas's 13, and then they end up putting up 7. The next one starts at Texas's 28. They put up 3. The next one after that starts at Texas 34. They put up 7. And then they only had 2 drives, okay? Out of the 6 scoring drives, there was only 2 that started in Georgia's own territory. So what that tells me is it was a really funky, weird game that basically, Georgia got to score off of some very short fields. I do think that this game is going to end up being close, but let's take a look at some more stats. All right, y'all, now let's dive a little bit deeper into the stats from the previous matchup between these two teams and talk about what they might want to keep the same and what they might want to change moving forward. So right now, what we're looking at is the team pass protection. This is from Pro Football Focus. I don't really look at those grades. I'm going to be looking at individual metrics. So right now, I'm looking at the amount of times that each pass protection faced blitzes and stunts. So for Texas, we're seeing that they saw blitzes about 32% of the time. That's a pretty solid number coming from UGA. And then as far as stunts, they saw that almost 29% of the time. But then you come on down to Georgia, you're seeing that they faced blitzes about 28% of the time, and they saw stunts about 23% of the time. Now, couple of interesting things right here. Come on back up to Texas. Let's take a look at these sacks and hits and all that type of stuff. This looks really bad. It looks like Texas got absolutely manhandled up front, and they're showing 8 sacks here. I think it was really only 7, but either way, 5 of those sacks came after Georgia was up by 17 points. So they really were able to pin their ears back and, get after Texas's quarterbacks. And I think that obviously, that's a huge problem. To me, it's not so much that the pass protection didn't hold up well, versus Georgia's front and blitzes. It was more about the situations that they got in. But I will still say this. They do need to work on picking up blitzes, because they didn't look great doing that really throughout the course of this game. And then it's also showing that Georgia gave up 0 sacks. I wanted to say that they got sacked once in that game, but either way, I would say that moving forward, Texas is going to make sure that they can stick to the run, that they can stay balanced so that Georgia can't just pin their ears back, or maybe catch them in some blitzes and throw some screens and things like that. As far as Georgia goes, I think that they're probably going to stick to a very, very similar game plan, maybe mix up a thing or two here, but they more than likely will start the game off doing exactly what they did in the previous game and see if Texas has found a way to beat it. Now let's take a look at the pass blitz tendencies. What we're seeing from Georgia is they were blitzing at about 32% of the time. 90% of those blitzes came from inside of the box. Georgia loves to run that A-gap blitz, and I saw A&M doing that to Texas. They did not look good picking it up. I can tell you that right here, right now. Coming on over here, this is the slot cornerback blitz. So they did that about 10% of the time. Cornerback blitz, 5%. Simulated pressure was at 25%. They were bringing 5-man pressures at 45% and 6-man pressures at 30%. That's a pretty high number. They put the pressure on Texas, and like what he's talked about, I would expect for Georgia to start this game off doing the exact same thing. Next for Texas, we have them blitzing at about 28% of the time versus Georgia in the previous game. 75% of those were box blitzes. They didn't have any slot cornerback blitzes, no cornerback blitzes, period. And I think that that's definitely going to change. Something that Georgia does not do a good job with are cornerback blitzes. Now, teams are kind of scared to do that because they run so many wide screens. But what I have noticed is the teams that are doing it are having success in doing it versus UGA. Texas also didn't show any simulated pressures, and I don't think that they brought enough 6-man pressures. They're only at about 17% right there. 75% of their pressures were only bringing 5. This is something that I'm not sure how much Texas will change, but they definitely need to. Georgia is a team that you need to heat them up. Do not be scared of Carson Beck carving you up, because every single time that he gets pressure on him, he turns into a very, very below average quarterback. So if they're smart, Texas will most definitely dial up more six-man pressures and bring the heat from the outside. Now let's take a look at the run concepts from each team. What we're seeing right here from Georgia is they didn't do very much outside zone, which would be right here, but they did pound that inside zone just like we talked about earlier. And that is something that Texas has struggled. Even still to this date, they're struggling to stop that. I would fully expect that Georgia's going to stick to doing things like that. They're going to stick to that inside zone. They didn't run very much power either. They're at about 7%. And I would personally expect that they might kind of go down on that, because Texas does a really good job versus power runs. Now, we're not going to look at all the rest of the running schemes because I don't think that they matter that much. But let's come on down to Texas. 41% outside zone. And something else that y'all are probably looking at, Texas only had 17 true running plays in this game. They're averaging 37 running plays in a game over the course of this season. So I do think that, number one, Texas is going to stick to the running game a lot more in this one. Outside zone should work well, but really versus Georgia, what you want to do is more of that power stuff to the outside. And Texas did not run any power plays, period, in this game. I think that that is a major problem, especially if Georgia gets into some of those light boxes. You absolutely have got to run power to the outside versus them. Every single team has had a lot of success doing that to Georgia. So I would expect that that would come up some. Also, inside zone at only 6% for Texas. What I have noticed, man, is that their inside zone actually is pretty dominant. They look very good doing that. So I would love to see them maybe stick to that a little bit more in this game to go up against Georgia's front. Because look, Georgia's front, it's good, but it is not elite. You can run the football right smack dab at them, especially with all the misdirection stuff that Texas tends to like to do. Now let's take a look at the targeted routes. This is going to be from Georgia's offense versus Texas. Like I told y'all, the wide screen is up at the top. It's always going to be up at the top. That's about 27% of their passing offense. Outside of that, okay, right there at number 2, it's saying in route, but that's really a dig. That's at 12%. Then right behind that is the slant at about 10%. Then they've got hitches and crossing routes. So like we talked about, man, you take away the flat area and you take away the middle. That's something that Texas's defense did a good job of versus Georgia in the previous game. Carson Beck's numbers looked absolutely horrible. So in this game, my question would be, will Georgia switch up anything within their passing game? I don't think that they will. They've pretty much been the exact same passing team over the past couple of seasons since Mike Bobo has been there. This is who they are. But I do think, if anything, Georgia's going to try to lean on their running game a little bit more in this game. And like I said, that could be a very big problem for Texas. All right, now let's take a look at what Texas did in their passing game versus UGA. Like we talked about, backfield flare is number 1. That was about 17% of their passing offense. And number 2, the not applicable, not quite sure what that is. That's probably a play where maybe they got sacked, or, you know, the ball was just thrown up or tipped, something like that. But either way, we'll skip on down to the in route. That, again, would be a dig, and that's about 10% of their offense. Actually, let's come on back up to number 2, because seeing that that's about 11.5% of what Texas did in their passing game, that should be concerning. That, to me, is more about a lack of execution, and it is a big problem to have 11% of your offense, you know, passing offense, being a lack of execution. Now, at number 3, we do have crossing routes. We all know that Texas loves to run those. Then we've got the speed out. That's something that Texas definitely loves to do. And then the hitch. What I'm looking for right here, y'all, are some more vertical passes. Texas needs to find a way to throw the football down the field, to get some isolation on the outside with Georgia's cornerbacks or their safeties, whoever inside of their secondary, and throw the doggone football down the field. If they do that, then that's going to be a very big problem for UGA. All right, y'all, this is the last one that we'll be looking at today. We're going to be talking about the coverage stats. I just want to show y'all the difference between Georgia's secondary and Texas's secondary. And I'm going to scroll this over to show you what I'm going to be focusing on right here, okay? So this area is what I like to look at just to see whose secondary is actually performing better. And if you look at this, it's pretty obvious, it's pretty clear that Georgia's secondary is having a lot of trouble, or at least they had a lot of trouble in this previous game. They've had trouble over the course of this season. I would still expect it in this upcoming game that they will have just as much trouble, especially if Texas can find those isolated one-on-one matchups that we just talked about. Now, for Georgia on the other side, like we said, man, they've got to stick to that running game and work off of play action. If they can stick to the run game, make Texas have to bring another safety up into the box and get out of that zone, play more man-to-man coverage, then all of a sudden, man, maybe Georgia can connect down the field on the outside. And I can almost guarantee you, whatever team has the most explosive plays, especially explosive passing plays in this game, will end up winning. All right, y'all, I just gave you a ton of information, but I want us to all be on the same page as we get into my game prediction. So we'll start off with each team wins if. So starting with Georgia, Georgia will win this game if they stick to the run. If they can be anywhere near as dominant as they were running the football in the previous game, I think that they will win this one, and they might win it pretty big. Number two is going to be to stop the run. Okay, that's pretty much goes hand in hand. You got to be able to run the football. You got to be able to stop the run. I don't know if they'll be able to stop it as much as they did in the previous matchup where Texas only averaged 1.1 to 2.3 yards per carry. But if they can come anywhere near that, they will have a great chance to win. Third thing for me is going to be don't stop blitzing. Like, keep on bringing those same blitzes because Sarkisian's offenses struggle versus blitzes. And you wouldn't think that because they run so many screens. But the screens are overly complicated. And Georgia found something with their blitz package because I saw Texas A&M and other teams trying to run the exact same blitz packages. And Texas really did not pick it up well. Not quite sure why those teams stopped running it versus Texas. But I will say this. If Georgia can just replicate what they did in the previous matchup, I think that they can find a ton of success and they could definitely win this football game. Now, Texas wins if, just like we said with Georgia, they stick to the run, but really Texas just needs to find some sort of a running game. They did not move Georgia's front at all in the previous matchup, which is crazy because everybody else has had success running on Georgia's defense. They're moving their guys up front, so I have no idea why Texas couldn't get that done. But the inside zone, I've seen that look good versus some other teams. Maybe they've picked it up right there. Also, I think some, outside power plays would be great, like we talked about versus Georgia, and also jet sweeps. It doesn't really matter what the running scheme is. Just find something that works and stick to it because you cannot, get held to 1.1 to 2.3 yards per carry in this game, or you're going to lose. Next thing is find the one-on-ones on the outside, man. Sark's got all these great weapons at wide receiver. I have no idea why they don't throw more deep passes. Is that more just on the quarterbacks not throwing it? Are teams doing their best to take that away? But man, Sark coached in the NFL, and he's coached in college at a high level for a very long time. He knows how to scheme up one-on-ones. Maybe he's just been saving it for the playoffs, or I have no idea what. But even if it's just, a three-step drop, throw up a fade versus a Georgia secondary that we know is a major liability in coverage, especially down the field, he's got to, I think, try to throw the football in some one-on-one matchups down the field, I'd say 3 to 4 times, if not more, in this game, just to make sure that Georgia can back up some. That should help out, with Texas's running game as well. Now let's move on to the last thing that I think Texas needs to do to win this game, and that's blitz more. And I'm not really talking about with their pass coverage because their pass coverage is good without blitzing. They get pressure with just 3 or 4, and they can sit back in coverage. But run blitz more because your tackles are getting destroyed. Like, they're getting moved 3-4 yards on almost every single running play. Your linebackers are making tackles, 3, 4, 5 yards down the field because they're not coming downhill quick enough. But whenever they blitz them, all of a sudden, man, their run defense looks a lot better. Now, you can't do that on every single play, but you got to do something, okay? You've got to do something within your run defense to stop the run better. And if Texas does those things, I definitely think that they will win this game. Same thing for Georgia. But, man, this game has been hard for me to pick because if you look at the stats from the previous game, it's so evenly balanced. And there was a lot of fluky things that kind of happened for Georgia to win, especially the way that they did. But also, you would think that maybe Georgia could have won by more, or they could have had better stats because they did dominate Texas's front on both sides. Now, coming into this game, I probably would be leaning more towards Texas because, number one, it is very hard to beat a good team twice in the same season. Also, man, like we just touched on, knowing that Georgia has been a team that has kind of gotten pushed around up front on both sides, in their running game, whether that's offense or defense, and Texas has been the exact opposite. You have to ask yourself, was that just, some weird game for Texas, or is Georgia going to do that to them again in this game? If Georgia does that, obviously, they're going to win. But I don't see that happening. I don't see that happening twice. I also think that Sark, he's going to find some ways to scheme up some people wide open down the field versus a Georgia secondary that's not great in downfield coverage. So I will go on ahead and say that I have Texas winning this game. I have them winning it by about 8 points. So pretty sizable margin, and we will see what happens after that. But those are my thoughts. Please share yours with me down in the comment section. And as always, please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. We'll see y'all on the next one. Thanks. Peace.